from your phone by dialing *9. All video screens will be turned off with the exception of the commissioners, Delia, and the current petitioner. Once the commission has acted on an application, the petitioner is free to leave the meeting. Screen sharing will not be permitted unless absolutely necessary. All votes will be taken by roll call vote. In the event of any technical difficulties, all matters on the agenda that have not been heard will automatically continue to the January 20th, 2021 NRC meeting. This meeting is being recorded and can be viewed on the Minuteman Media website. If anyone is recording the meeting, I ask you to so inform the commission. At this time, I would ask the commissioners to introduce themselves. Judy?
Judy Sonbrecker.
Nick?
Nick Pappas.
And Greg?
Greg Higgins.
And Sarah.
Sarah Grimwood.
Great, thanks guys. All right, first order of business is the meeting minutes from November 4th. I forwarded on to Karen one comment I had. Anyone else?
I
Yeah,
had one minor comment, yes. And I sent it to Karen too.
Great.
I had one on page 3. I didn't send it along because frankly, I read it about 30 minutes ago. And it's on page 3 in the paragraph that starts Matthew Morrow. And the second sentence, it says, he explained that the garage cannot be moved back as recommended because of zoning setbacks and water service for the house. And I think that is misleading as to what the problem was. The problem, I think, Ed, was the water. So I suggest that I modify that, and I will send that along to the modification where it says that it moved back and say, instead of recommended, it was suggested by the commission, to the that we suggested that he move it back to the zoning setback, and he couldn't be moved back because of the water service. It wasn't that it couldn't be moved back because of the zoning setbacks, and I think that's the key issue of this, is it's the water service that's holding it up.
Right.
And I think that sentence doesn't accentuate that enough.
Okay, fair comment. Thank you.
Can I make,
Motion to
can I
accept
make
the
one
minutes
more?
as amended?
Can I make one more suggested revision, which I just noticed looking at them today? Under the potential enforcement order with Mr. Johnson, Judy had suggested that until all the violation issues were resolved, that no further action should be taken. So you said that, Judy, and the commission concurred. So I would just recommend adding that sentence at the end, the commission concurred.
Okay.
Great.
I make a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
Second.
Okay, we'll take a vote. Nick?
Aye.
Judy?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Okay, we're moving on to the director's update.
So I'm very pleased to announce that we have the land manager position posted. So we're recruiting for that position now. Applications are due by January 22nd. So if there are folks that you know of that would be interested in applying, they can look at the job description at the HR website on concordma.gov. We've already just got posted a few days ago, and we already have a dozen, maybe more applications. So very excited to have that finally in motion. Also wanted to let you know that the town has hired a ranger to basically to enforce the rules and regulations along Estabrook Trail, that dogs are on leash and people are masked, so that the town is in compliance with the judge's order regarding Estabrook Woods. The person that we hired is Bill Brooks. He's the former chief ranger from the National Park Service. Really, really good guy. I hope that you run into him. And if you do, please welcome him and let him know who you are. He's tremendous, and he's done this work for a long time. So I think I don't think we could have gotten a better person in this position.
Delia, is that a full-time position?
It's not, it's a part-time position. He's out there every day for a couple of hours a day. So, you know, half-time position. And the town manager has expressed an interest in having that be a year-round. And I'm not sure whether that supplements or replaces the summer rangers that we generally have, but I think it would probably be a supplement to those folks that we hire in the summers. We hire one additional ranger in the summer to you know, be out there as well. But he's terrific. I think we're very, very lucky to find him.
Delia, is he a part of the Natural Resources Department?
So he is, yeah, I mean, essentially I'm his supervisor, so he's part of the
Okay.
Group. Right, so I mean, he's doing mostly work on Estabrook Trail, but also some work on conservation land as well. Punkatasset, walking those trails as well on a more limited fashion to make sure that people there are keeping their dogs on leash and that sort of thing. But the primary role that the town manager wanted him to do was the Estabrook land. And then I also wanted to let you know, as Judy knows, the CPC recommended approval for all the 4 division projects for Community Preservation Act funding. So the Emerson CR, the Warner Pond dredging, the old rifle range improvements, and Chamberlain Bridge design. So that's
great news.
Yeah,
really encouraging.
Yeah, we'll be voting on those recommendations probably at our next meeting. There's just kind of some paperwork that we want to kind of tighten up to make sure everything adds up correctly.
When is that next meeting, Judy? Is it a?
It's in, I want to say it was 2 weeks from yesterday, so that's the 19th. But everybody was very supportive of the projects. The select board was supportive of them, which was very, very good also. So, so it was really nice to hear the support across the board for those projects.
Yeah, absolutely. Good news.
Yep, and that's it for me, Ed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Delia. So we have a couple of continuances. Do I have a motion to continue DEP file number 137-1504 to January 20th?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, take a vote. Judy?
Aye.
Nick?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
And I am a yes as well. And the second continuance to February 3rd for Lot 2A Cuca Road. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
This is so moved. Yeah.
Okay,
Second.
second. Okay, take a vote. Judy?
Aye.
Nick?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
I am a yes as well. Great. So now we'll move to the first continuance of the evening. Notice of intent, Middlesex School, DEP file number 137-1545. And I think before we get going on that, I think it's fair to say we've got a good understanding of what's generally transpiring here. And as I understand it, there's a small handful of DPW comments still being worked on or outstanding. A lot of those have been clarified and approved. I know, Steve, you had sent along a memo to the board noting that an alternatives analysis is underway with a couple of consultants you've retained, which is great. I would note that, as we all learn a little bit more about artificial turf fields, that I'm sure you'll take consideration all the pros and cons of both turf and artificial turf. So we have a fuller understanding of those issues, such as on artificial turf, potential water use for cooling of the fields, and other upkeep issues, reading about maybe disinfection of some of these issues, disinfecting some of the fields from time to time, water upkeep and some other issues. So as your consultants look at that, I'm sure they'll do a good job in providing appropriate pros and cons throughout. And then I assume, I think Delia has said that we might be hearing from a toxicologist this evening in terms of some of the issues we brought forth of concern for the wetlands. And I think there's still maybe an invasive management plan that's outstanding. So anyway, if we could bring some focus to that, that would be appreciated as we talk through the issues. And with that, who'll be leading off for the Middlesex this evening?
Yeah, thank you. This is Steve McEwen from the Middlesex School. And like you said, I know it's actually weirdly been a while since we've been on to talk about this. We have been working with S3 Designs. They are an architectural firm that really focuses on athletic facilities. They are an independent consultant who is really managing the alternative analysis for us. And we hope to have a draft this week and have that filed for Friday for the commission to view. And it lists pros and cons for all reputable surfaces in New England for playability. There's also wetlands impact that will be included, and then as well as just financial implications for the school. So hopefully that would also allow the commission to understand the direction that we would hope to go. Since our last meeting, we have also looked at a couple of other installations in Massachusetts that were brought up at the last meeting, and those will also be included in the alternative analysis. We do have some friends here from Weston and Sampson tonight. Marie, she's the toxicologist, and she's here to answer some of the questions. Ryan Chmielewski is also here, who has presented to this group a couple of times. And you're exactly right. We've been working with DPW. They were out to review some test pits. And I think ultimately what you hear here tonight is, we are still presenting to you a turf field here. And again, I have not received the alternative analysis, and if changes will be made to the filing, we'll find out. So, but we did want to address some of the comments that have come up. So then when the alternative analysis comes out, we are comparing apples to apples, understanding the different TPEs versus the different crumb rubbers. And so we thought it would be helpful to hear from a toxicologist before that information dump on the group. So
Appreciate that.
Yeah,
thank you, Steve.
Absolutely. So, I'll bring it to Ryan to lead off, just to get the group back to understand what it is, and then, open it up to Marie to, address some of those comments that continue to keep up. So.
Sure. Thanks, Steve. Happy New Year, Commission. It's good to see some familiar faces. Just really wanted to, I don't know if you want me to really go into what some of the changes were for the DPW, but we've modified the drainage design to eliminate a perforated pipe in a potential groundwater area. That was one of the major design changes. We've worked out some of the detailing, and after doing some further research on microplastics, there are a couple other design tweaks that we are going to propose to help mitigate or actually greatly reduce the chance of any migration of microplastics towards the wetlands. So that's one of the major features that we're going to do. Like, there's a trench drain along the eastern side that collects surface water. We're going to eliminate that trench drain and pop in a couple area drains on the Grass Hill side. And those area drains are going to have silt sacks in them full time. So there's limited exposure for migration of microplastics. As well as on the downstream side, we have proposed a couple of the stone trench, infiltration trench, level spreaders to discharge the water in a sheet flow scenario. Prior to that discharge point, we're exploring hooded catch basins should any floating material get out, and also a baffled engineering structure that captures both floating substances as well as sediment substances that would sink to the bottom. And essentially it just lets clean water get discharged into that level spreader. So really there's no physical way for any microplastics or infill turf or infill of the turf system to migrate off the field towards that direction. Additionally, one of the advantages of the location is that all foot traffic is directed away from the wetlands. Anyone coming on and off the field is either to the north or to the east. So migration of anything from the field towards the wetlands is very slim to almost none. Also, part of the proper maintenance of a synthetic turf field is key and crucial to not having to keep replenishing the infill system. It can get compacted over time, but if you properly groom the fields, it'll reduce that compaction and reduce the need for replenishment of the infill system. So those are some, simple measures to take that I think will be very effective.
And Ryan, those details are being drawn up now. Because
Yes,
they're
yeah.
today.
Correct. So during the time since we last submitted to now, we've done some pretty good research on our end, and really wanted to find ways to prevent that migration.
Great. Okay, thank you. Nick?
Yeah, a question on that. Is there some sort of regular cleaning interval for those traps? Or how does that work?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So as part of that, we will, just like you have to do for construction, sedimentation, and erosion control on a site, those silt sacks may get filled up, so it's periodic inspection. I imagine actually that those silt sacks will potentially capture sediment just from soil migration more than it would the other material. But yeah, there's periodic inspection, especially after certain rain events, as well as that baffle system has manhole ports in the top where you could open up and visually inspect looking down to see if a cleaning is needed or not.
So there'd be some sort of regular management plan for cleaning those and disposing of whatever's in there.
Sure.
Okay.
Judy?
Yeah, with regards to, if I understand correctly, there's some type of drains that will allow separation of lighter materials and then that stuff that falls to the bottom. Is that correct? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Where does one expect any microplastics that might be washed off the field end up?
The specific infill system that's being proposed at this point is not buoyant and it'll settle. So
Okay.
We're looking to take them out of the bottom. However, in a heavy, if water ever gets there, because the majority of the water is going to percolate through the soil anyway. But if there is a heavy influx of rain, we have, and some does float over the top. Again, it will settle, but also if any floating material, it prevents floating material from getting by.
Okay, and I assume that they've analyzed the particle size distribution to understand the settling rate of these materials and whether they actually will settle.
Yeah, that'll be part of what we're proposing.
Okay.
Okay. So Ryan, that's your end of the discussion this evening?
Yes, and we have Marie here tonight. I think there's a list of concerns or topics that I thought the commission would like to hear directly from the point source toxicologist. And Marie, if you want to take it away.
Sure. So I was sent 3 questions today via email. The first question was, do lab toxicology results differ from real life conditions? And I had previously gotten an email from Delia about, I think kind of asking me about a study, Campari 2018, which had indicated that there's a release of particles and organic compounds and metals from crumb rubber used in synthetic turf under chemical and physical stress. And that same study went on to indicate that thermoplastic elastomers do not contain significant concentrations of leachable heavy metals. And of course, thermoplastic elastomer is the polymer that's used in EcoFill, which is one of the proposed fill materials that we're, infills that we're talking about with this synthetic turf field, the proposed synthetic turf field. While it's true that synthetic turf and various infills do contain chemicals, in a laboratory setting with chemical stress, such as treatment with an acid or with physical stress, such as heating, yes? Such as heating to 158 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the temperature that was done in the Campari study. Those chemicals will leach out of the synthetic turf or infill. However, there are numerous studies that show that under natural conditions, the concentrations of constituents that leach from the synthetic turf and the infills are at concentrations that are well below applicable health standards and at concentrations that do not pose a significant risk. And there's a number of studies that show this. This was also the case at the Fenn School in Concord, where Haley and Aldrich collected 5 years of groundwater monitoring analysis for semi-volatile organic compounds, as well as dissolved metals. At the Fenn School, they had the infill that they used was crumb rubber, which here we're proposing to use a different type of infill. EcoFill has essentially very low to trace to non-detectable levels of metals. Essentially, the concentrations of metals within EcoFill is below background concentrations. And when I say background concentrations, that's background concentrations in natural soils. So for instance, the concentration of zinc that was detected in the EcoFill material was 2.22 milligram per kilogram, that's parts per million. In background soil, in natural soil that hasn't been contaminated, the concentration of zinc is typically around 100 parts per million. So that's, 2 versus 100. We're talking extremely low concentrations of trace metals. So let's see. So at the Fenn School, they detected either non-detectable concentrations or concentrations that were just above detection limits of the semi-volatile compounds. And the metals, they actually were mostly detected at background concentrations, and then a few that were just above background concentrations. The only metal that they detected in any real concentrations was zinc, which is typical of the type of infill that they were using. They're using crumb rubber infill, and crumb rubber, because it's made from tires, tires have between 3 and 8% zinc oxide. So the crumb rubber does leach some concentration of zinc over time. However, the studies, the Fenn School study went on to quantify those concentrations of zinc, and that they found that at no point during the 5 years of analysis did the concentrations of zinc approach or even go above any applicable ecological standards. And they were using method 1 standards that are protective, or Massachusetts DEP method 1 standards that are protective of aquatic receptors. Let's see. So that pretty much answers the first question. Do you have any additional comments on the first question?
Was I know some thermoelastic thermoplastics use cobalt as a catalyst when they're made. Is cobalt one of the compounds that's potentially in that resin or not?
So cobalt was one of the ones that it was not detected in the data that I have.
Okay.
So, you know, they are advertising that this has essentially no concentrations of metals, and in the analysis that I did see, and I can send you the data that I have, the concentrations were extremely low, well below background, well below what you'd see in natural soil.
Okay.
And the results that you have on the material, are these all lab results, or are these combination of field testing, or just simply lab?
So the EcoFill data is lab results.
Okay.
And can I also just clarify that these, you know, I had a conversation with Ryan this morning about, you know, he had asked about what the toxicology report should include. So these are not questions that came from me or from the commission. It was just more of a heads up to what to be prepared to discuss tonight. So just so people are clear that, I mean, this is really for the commission to be asking Marie questions on what you would like the toxicology report to be focusing on, as well as hearing from Marie on, you know, what you're providing, you know, the information. But any information, Marie, that you provide, I would recommend that be provided in writing with a, you know, some sort of protocol that the commission is going to direct you tonight to respond to.
Sure, absolutely. I can provide that in writing.
Marie, another question I had is just the issue about PFAS. You know, obviously, you know, it's, as I understand, a constituent that, you know, is used to make, you know, plastic softer and more supple, and, you know, for all these artificial turf fields. What is the record here in regard to PFAS and how they degrade, you know, in terms of use going forward?
Right, so the synthetic turf that we recommend does not have PFAS in it, and we've gone actually back to our manufacturers to make sure that there is no PFAS in the infill or the turf. They provide us with data that shows that there's no PFAS in there, as well as a statement indicating that they don't use PFAS in their carpets or in their manufacturing process. I think because of water quality concerns, it's very important that we use synthetic turf that does not contain PFAS at all.
So I guess the only other follow-up I'd have to that is, so in lieu of PFAS, what are the manufacturers using to, you know, get to that quality of material that's being used in the fields? Because obviously you start to alternate materials, you know, there's a repercussion of, you know, what might come off of that, if you will, in terms of.
Right. So my understanding is that, and you know, I'm not an engineer, but
Nor am I.
my understanding is that the PFAS is used as a manufacturing agent to prevent the turf from sticking to the extruder. And I from what I've heard, there's a number of materials that they can use instead of PFAS materials to do that. I would have to go back to the manufacturer and find out what exactly they're using. But in terms of PFAS, we have asked the manufacturers to provide evidence that they're not using PFAS in their synthetic turf or in the manufacture of the synthetic turf. Just because it is, you know, I'm from Stowe, which has some water quality issues with PFAS, and we don't want to, you know, have any of the synthetic turf that we install have PFAS in it.
Okay.
I think the item that I recall is used many times in plastic items to soften them up is phthalates. And is that one of the chemical compounds that is used or measured in the materials?
Yes, that's typically measured. And again, that was another thing that was another one of the analyses that was done on the ecofill, and that was all non-detect. So I looked at data that was for SVOCs, and typically you'll see PAHs at somewhat higher concentrations come off of they come off of crumb rubber, and this analysis was all ND. So what we're typically looking for with synthetic turf has not shown up with ecofill.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think it's the commission's, I guess, at least my position that it would be helpful as you analyze the ecofill, get feedback from the manufacturer, that I'd still be looking for a 5-year testing program as you learn more, and have you come back to the board and suggest what you think would be most sensible given the product, what you've learned from the product, and suggest what you might do over the 5-year monitoring program, so that we can give some comfort to the commission, the public, that we're studying what this might be. It adds to the data that we're collecting from other fields such as the high school, Penn School, and it makes us all more knowledgeable going forward for this type of application.
Ed, when you were introducing this portion of the hearing, I thought I heard you mention something about disinfectants used on the fields. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, Judy, I just been over the past couple of weeks just trying to get a little bit more knowledgeable about, the pros and cons of turf and artificial turf and so on. And again, what do I know about the details of the turf field or the artificial turf field? But one thing that struck me as I was reading, and again, a lot of these articles have biases, right? Some of them are industry groups on one side versus industry groups on the other side. So you've got to kind of try to do your best to kind of see if there's some consistency out there in some of the readings. And one thing that struck me was that, as you can imagine, there's sports going out, it's competitive. There's, sometimes you get cuts, sprays around some of their, whether it's sweat, whether it's a little bit of blood or a little cut, if it hits an artificial material like plastics, it's got nowhere to go, right? And it sits there. Where it's hitting real turf, right? There's bacteria there. There's the grass degrades and so on. So it kind of self-cures, right? It kind of goes away. We don't worry about those things on turf fields. It seemed to indicate that from time to time you have to disinfect the artificial fields to subdue those concerns about activities that have occurred on the field that don't get transmission to other players and other going forward. So that was the concern I read, and I just raised that so that just ensure that And as Steve mentioned, they're going to do a thorough alternatives analysis. So all those things taken into consideration would be helpful to understand.
Based on that, it would be helpful from a toxicology standpoint, if there is going to be a disinfectant maintenance regime,
Yes.
that we have the information on what the disinfectants are and the chemical makeup and, what they do, how they biodegrade, in the environment and how that would be managed. So that would be, if that's part of the system, would be looking for that information also.
Right. According to the manufacturer's standard operating procedure, I did take a quick look at it today before the meeting. Outdoor synthetic fields are, according to the SOP, they're exposed to the sun's UV rays and they don't require sanitation and disinfection. The rainwater washes away the minor dirt and pollen and that sort of thing. However, in the case of, somebody bleeding on the field, I'm sure that, some sort of disinfection probably should happen.
Yeah.
The SOP also indicated normal cleaners if you should not physically affect the field. However, they should be thoroughly rinsed from the field to prevent a slippery surface for the players.
Okay. Yeah, I think that any chemical, regular maintenance, the chemical makeup that would be used for those, having that information would be good, because surfactants, quats that would be in there can have an impact on, as you know, on the aquatic life and the wetlands.
Right. Yeah. I mean, according to the SOP, a disinfectant is not required or even recommended. But, like I said, spot cleaning may occur. But I would think that the spot cleaning would be in such a small area at a time that it probably wouldn't affect aquatic life outside the area of the turf.
Okay, so it wouldn't be like a whole field, it would be just a small area.
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions from the commissioners on this issue? Okay. And then I think the last thing I had, at least on my list, was the invasive management plan. I assume that's being prepared in the background for either the next meeting or the following meeting.
So I can follow up with you, Ryan, on that. I'm sorry, we talked this morning and I didn't bring that up. I apologize. But what we received didn't have any information related to the invasive species management plan. So there just needs to be more information in terms of how that will be done, what invasives you're looking to manage, what the area is, having that area delineated on the plan, and then what replanting would be associated with that. And similarly, we also, I didn't mention this morning either. I just forgot. I'm sorry. I've been out of the office for a few days. So just catching up on a lot of stuff. The pollinator meadow establishment should just be clearly delineated on the plan where those limits will be.
Okay.
Don't worry about writing this all down. I can email this to you, or we can have a conversation tomorrow.
Okay, that sounds good. In terms of the invasive species management plan, is that something we could work out as a condition if approval is imminent because of timing of year?
No,
No.
it's got to be part of the commission needs to see that as part of the approval process. So
Okay.
It's not something that the commission will condition.
Okay. So, I mean, it's like a blanket invasive species removal at this point. What do we cover? We need to really identify the species before we come up with the appropriate measures to
Yeah, and that's, I mean, somebody can go out and identify what species you have out there, regardless of if it's winter or summer. I mean, those invasives are, is that what you're concerned about?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's the major ones that are very visible any time of year that you can.
Right, all the woodies are going to be very clear, regardless of the season. If there's garden mustard or anything else out there, then that won't be visible now, but you can prepare an invasive species management plan any time of year. And the commission isn't, it would be very unusual. I don't think the commission has ever sort of conditioned an approval of an invasive species management plan on a project. It's always part of the project because the mitigation is what offsets the impacts from the work.
Sure, we'll get that together.
Okay. If there are no other comments by the commissioners, I'd like to turn it over to the public, see if there are any public comment in regard to this.
Don't see any, Ed.
There's Janet, I think.
Sorry.
Well, we brought up the idea of putting in
Just introduce yourself. I'm sorry, Janet.
Thank you.
on Main Street. I know we brought up the idea of grass fields which can be built so that they really perform well, and we sent you some data on that. How much consideration have you given to that?
I think Steve can speak up. I think he clearly stated that in the alternatives analysis, they are going to take into consideration those issues brought up previously by the public as well as the commission. So Steve, I assume that you'll follow up on that.
Yeah, correct. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
And just to add to that, Ed, we did go in person and see the grass that was referenced by Ms. Miller, and there was also a natural infill that was talked about that Minuteman Tech is considering. And we went and we looked at a field installation at the Tower School in Marblehead as well. So those are both going to be included on that analysis.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that.
And yep, Sharon McGregor has her hand raised.
Hi, Sharon.
Hi, thank you. If not already answered earlier in the meeting, two questions. What is the scope of the alternatives analysis? What is the scope of the alternatives that the alternatives analysis will cover? And secondly, is the Middlesex School considering alternatives just within the design, the present design, or alternatives to the project, including the grass fields alternative?
Steve or Ryan?
Yeah, happy. I mean, again, to reiterate, the alternative analysis is all reputable playing surfaces that are available to the school in New England. It's going to look at pros and cons from, again, playability, and that's reliability through inclement weather and a changing climate, financial implications. And then again, we are going to consider wetland impact in that alternative analysis. And Marie will also provide that toxicology memo that kind of touches on those topics that are outlined. They're typically pretty detailed spreadsheets when I've seen them done before. Every firm likes to keep theirs in their pocket because it's a lot of work. So they're hard to find. So like I said, S3 Designs is managing the one that we are looking at. They're working with Gale Associates, which is a larger firm here in New England. Neither of those firms have anything to do with this project. They're just going to provide a list of, again, reputable surfaces that perform well, especially to the high school athlete, that includes grass, it includes multiple infills.
Mhm.
So.
Great. Thank you very much.
Ed Beverly Bryant has her hand raised.
Hi, Beverly.
That works.
Here we go.
Sorry, I'm still trying to manage the hand thing. Yeah, I've just recently been reading about 6-ppd quinone, which has been killing salmon in the northwest. And I had the feeling that that was really related to preservatives in rubber, in tires. But since there seems to be some crossover of chemicals between these plastic fields and the rubber ones, I wondered whether you would be testing for 6-ppd. It actually goes in as 6-ppd. It's the reaction with ozone that causes it to become the quinone, which causes the salmon die-off. It's pretty toxic to fish. So do you have any thoughts on that? I guess that would be to Marie. Oh, and my name is Beverly Bryant, and I'm 175 Conant Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly.
Well, we will come up with a proposed testing plan, and we'll have to have the town approve it, but that can be included in the testing program.
Would it not be included in the analysis of the actual material? I mean, testing something is hit and miss when it's coming out of the material, but if you were to take the material and analyze for that chemical or find out whether it went in there in the first place, would that not be a more sure way to do it?
Yeah, we could do something like that. But of course, we have not done that. That is not one of the chemicals that's been tested in the eco-fill of the analysis that I've seen. We can go back to the manufacturer and see if they have tested for that.
Well, it's a preservative, so I'm assuming that if they actually make this stuff, then surely they would know what they made it with.
Right.
I mean, it's not like car tires that they take and they actually create
Right.
from that. They create the stuff, right? So they
Right.
must have a breakdown of the chemicals that go into creating it.
Right. So we could ask if it's within the eco-fill, just the same as we asked if they manufacture the eco-fill with PFAS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Keely, any other comments out there from the public that you see?
I see none.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Steve, Ryan, Marie, appreciate that. One question for you. I know we've kind of picked away at this thing, kind of piecemeal as necessary over the past few months. Are you looking to come back before the board on January 20th, or do you want to push it out to the first week in February in order to give you enough time to kind of, holistically present the project, the missing pieces at that time? What do you think you need?
I've been told that we'll have what we need to file by Friday. So, if we could keep a spot on that 20th agenda, that would be great. That includes the analysis, and that's going to include the updates for DPW and just kind of what we talked about earlier, those engineering controls for any concerns.
So
with plastics.
I think it's fine to keep you on track for the next meeting agenda, but if all information, you've got a fair amount of information to develop and provide. So if you don't have all of that by Friday, then I would suggest that you continue out to a February meeting so that it can all just be reviewed in one sort of fell swoop. But yeah, I mean, stay on if you want to stay on for the the January 20th meeting.
Yeah.
Stay on for that, and if you need to continue out, if everything is not full, rather than rush things and have it not be complete or fully vetted or whatever it is. You know, you might need a little bit more time than 2 days to get all that information together in order to attend the meeting that's in 2 weeks. So, but I think that's fine to stay on for now and then continue out if you need to.
Yeah, I just want to see if we can get that information for Friday, and I'm an optimist today, so thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Steve. Okay. So now we're moving on to, I think we can just continue.
So I
that
would
one.
I would just clarify just for the public that the meeting is going to be continued to the January 20th
20th.
meeting, but it might be further kicked out, and an agenda, a future agenda will reflect whether or not that's going to be on the 20th or on the February
3rd.
3rd. Thank
Yeah.
you. Every
Yeah.
third meeting.
Thanks, Delia.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
All right, moving on to new applications, 160 Range Road, DEP file number 137-1551. We'll be presenting for the applicant this evening.
That will be me. For the record,
Hey.
Molly Obendorf with Stamsky McNary. Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Molly.
I am representing the applicant, Alex DeFreitas, and also the owner, Chris and Tina Winkleman. And the property is located at 160 Range Road. There's an existing single-family house and a bordering vegetated wetland to the east. The proposed work consists of the installation of a pool, the associated pool patio, as well as a pool house. And there will be mitigation in the form of infiltration trenches for both the pool house as well as the patio. Additionally, there will be 14 trees removed within the buffer zone, 2 of which are currently dead. So we have proposed 12 replacement native coniferous trees along the southern property line. And erosion controls will be provided. Grading is shown on the plan. It's pretty straightforward. If the commission has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Okay. You know, I guess in talking to Delia earlier, I think there seems to be a conflict in the tree count. Delia, I think you were counting a higher total of removal versus 14.
So there are 3 more trees. So in total on the property, 17 trees will be removed, 3 of which are outside the buffer zone.
Okay.
So 14 of which are within the buffer zone, 2 of which the 14 are currently dead. So we'll be replacing the 12 trees being removed in the buffer zone.
Okay. And I guess one of the questions that when I was looking at the plan, it just struck me a little bit that some of the trees being removed, which are kind of in that lower quadrant, very close to the, you know, the away from the pool area, and one is almost on the line there. You know, right down in this corner where Delia is indicating. I'm just curious why those are all kind of being, you know, cut. They
Yeah,
seem
sure.
far enough away from the house. I understand that there's a desire to put some solar panels on the house, and you know, obviously want to remove some shade considerations there. But these seem to be quite a ways away. So.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I did talk to Alex DeFreitas, who is the contractor for the project, confirmed with him that these trees do need to be removed in order to remove the shade that would be over the house for the solar panels. So it was confirmed with me that it is a necessity to remove those trees.
Okay. Let's see. Other than that, I think there's some. I'm not sure that the mitigation required is somewhere in the 1,300, 1,400 square foot range, but I don't think any mitigation has been proposed. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, mitigation in the form of drainage structures. There's an infiltration trench for both the house and the pool, and then you know we are providing those replacement trees. So I would consider those things to be mitigation for the proposed work.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions, quick
Yeah,
concerns here?
Getting back to the trees, Ed and Molly. Molly, it's hard for me to believe that the trees that are on the south border down the slope of the incline would impact the roof of that dwelling. They may impact the shade quality adversely to the pool. But how tall are these trees?
Yeah.
I don't know offhand.
No, but I mean, just look at it, let's be reasonable. It's got to be, what, 100, 200 feet away from the house?
Maybe about 100, Greg, I'd say, or
Well, I'm looking at the
80
100-foot buffer.
yeah.
Yeah, 125 feet. Settle with me on 125 feet. And they're down the slope. So I don't know. It just seems like I don't want to assume that we did this for solar. I'm not saying I'm even against taking them tree down, Molly, but I'd like to know the reason is commensurate with reality out there. And it just doesn't seem to be commensurate with reality. That's all.
That's something I can confirm with Alex on those trees, maybe.
You know, if you took the height of the tree and the elevation of the trees and the elevation of the ridge of the house, it would give you some sort of an idea of whether that's a reality or not, or whether, and if they're taking them down for shade on the pool, that doesn't mean I'd vote against it, but I just have a hard time believing that, that's all.
Yeah, I mean, I can see if there's any information, if there is any way to measure the height of these trees, so we can compare with the elevation of where they're at with the house.
They are in the southern exposure, so I do understand that if they are, they certainly would impact the roof. I don't have an issue with that.
Right.
Yeah,
And
that's-
it's a straightforward procedure to measure the height of a tree. It's a very easy thing to do.
Okay.
And it should be something that is provided in writing as to what the height of the tree is and what the shading impacts would be. And those, so you've said that you've provided mitigation. You're providing mitigation for the trees that are coming down. You need to specify what those trees are that are being.
My follow-up is what are the trees here?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's great that you're putting in the infiltration trenches. That's awesome. But as you know, the commission wants to see a one-to-one habitat replacement for new impervious structure that's going in. So, you know, you could revegetate that slope with some plantings, something that offsets that 1,300 plus square foot of impervious with new plantings is something that should also come through on the next proposal.
Okay, I can certainly talk with the homeowner and applicant about that.
I'm just trying to remind myself, does it say in here, assuming the trees are all removed, are they just going to be cut down to stump, or what's
I believe it would just be cut down to stump. I don't know. I can't confirm that.
We
I
probably
can,
want to confirm that in the
Yep, I can
plan.
certainly get an answer
Yeah.
for that. Yep.
I think we do like to have some snags left around, depending on the situation.
Yeah, particularly that one adjacent.
Snags are a good thing. Some.
Gotcha. Okay. And as far as the type of tree that will be planted, I believe a native coniferous tree is preferred to provide year-long privacy, but I don't think the homeowner, knew what he wanted to plant exactly. But he is open to suggestion from the commission, and like I said, they will be native planting. So if that's something that needs to be provided, a plant list as a condition of the order, we'd be happy to do that.
No, so it has to be on the plan, and there are very few native coniferous trees. Hemlock, there's very few, Molly, but you can consult with Dave Crossman or somebody who, you can look at what's on the Native Plant Trust website. But those, those need to be on the plan.
Is there
Also-
concern that since those trees are on the southern property line, is there any concern about the shadow cast on the roof with regards?
Yeah,
to
that's
the-
what I'm wondering, because one of the trees being removed is right next to one of the
Right.
new ones going in. So, there probably has to be some clarification about how tall the new ones are going to get, and are they going to get too,
Right.
are they going to, it just
Eventually.
doesn't
Yeah.
add up. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I can confirm that.
thanks.
But you wouldn't think that you'd be planting trees on the southern part of your house if you wanted to have solar panels on your roof.
That's what I was thinking.
I mean, if you put a number in, you'd think you'd want to plant them to where they wouldn't have an impact on your roof.
Right.
Yeah,
We can
The
discuss
homeowner
that.
wants to- Yeah, I think those are proposed because
Hedging
they're,
the pool versus replacing the trees you're taking out.
yeah, I
Mhm.
think it appears to be more of a privacy issue,
That's what it is.
perhaps.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, just a minor note here, I think you noted that a fencing detail should also be added to the plans for the pool.
Yep. Yeah, so one of the fences, the one along the southern property line, that will be a 6-foot wood privacy fence. The reason that the main reason that the homeowner wanted that proposed, other than, accommodating the regulations for a pool, he's had issues with unleashed dogs coming off the conservation trails and going onto his property. So that is there to, hopefully prevent that from happening. I think when I spoke to Colleen, she mentioned gaps in the fencing to allow for wildlife passage. I don't think that'll be an issue on the metal fencing around the pool, given that it's still up to code with what's required to be around the pool. I do think, however, that would kind of defeat the purpose of the wood privacy fence. And I'm wondering, if having it on the metal fence would be sufficient in this case.
Delia, thoughts on that?
yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Great.
All right, any other comments from the commissioners? Okay. Anyone?
Let me get this
Greg?
straight. Is the wooden fence going to be on the southern border? Yes or no?
Yes.
And the reason is to potentially keep dogs out of their backyard?
That's correct. Yeah. It's
And
happened on multiple
Why can't the
occasions.
dog just walk around the fence? It doesn't
Mhm.
isolate anything.
I mean, you could, but it would be a longer path around, and the wood fence is more direct for them. And also the metal fence, I think there's 4-inch gaps between the bars too. So that's,
Okay, I just wanted to okay, good enough.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a pain. Okay.
Any commentary from the public? Oh, Delia, you see anybody out
Seeing
there?
any? I'm not
Okay.
seeing any.
Okay, so Molly, we'll continue on to January 20th. You can get this details and information in by Friday.
yep, we'll shoot for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, next hearing, 144 Upland Road, DEP file number 137-1552. Who'll be speaking?
Hi, my name is Lindsay Carlisle, and 144 Upland Road. And our plan is to add a first floor bedroom so that we can age in place. And the project consists of converting the existing office space to a laundry closet and a full bath. And the size of the proposed addition is 243 square feet. When we submitted the application, the office brought a couple of things to our
I can't hear.
I can't, yeah.
Yeah, I can't hear.
I think it's
Looks like she
frozen up a little
froze
bit,
up,
Lindsay.
unfortunately.
Yeah. Let's give it a minute. Lindsay, you've been frozen up. If you can hear us, maybe you could, if it continues, maybe you could just call in. And Delia can have the plan on and we can continue.
Or she could turn off her video.
Yeah, you can turn off your video and that should free up some bandwidth.
Has she dropped off? Yeah.
Could we jump to Wright Farm and then come back when she comes back on?
Sure. That's a good suggestion, Greg. Thanks. Well, why don't we do so? All right, so we'll hold that.
Let's hear from Wright Farm.
Yeah, let's hold aside and we'll move to Wright Farm Condominium, RDA file number 20-21. And who'll be taking us through this?
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
sorry, I'm watching our crazy news going on here.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I hear you. Good evening.
Good evening. So I am the property manager for Wright Farm Condominium, and I think Nick or our was supposed to be on with me to go into more detail about what we wanted to do here.
He is on the call.
Yes, okay. Nick, do you want to kind of take over and describe it better than I could, or?
Nick, you out there?
I saw he was.
Okay, yeah, is my audio on?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Nick Novick here, Small Planet Landscaping. I'm working in cooperation with John Engwer at Eastern Design and Landscape Contractors, who will be doing the invasive control work. We did submit an outline of our plan back in November, I guess. I can try to summarize that, or I don't know if the commission had any particular questions about that. It's about 3 pages I wrote. It's an outline for invasive plant control program at Wright Farms, Concord, Mass.
You know, as I understand the applications, it's you know, to kind of extend the mitigation for the invasives, which is great. But of note is it seems like it's a fairly general submission for the extension, and it seems like going forward it would be helpful to have more specifics in regard to what's occurred on an annual basis out there. What, you know, and I think as I'm sure Delia has passed on the notes, a little bit more specific in terms of treatments, what was successful, what wasn't successful, what was removed in the past year, you know, and what's the approach for the coming year, and so on, and make sure that we do receive annual reports in regard to the mitigation efforts out there.
We really haven't done anything for the past few years.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I guess, so I only took over the management about 2 years ago, and I guess they used to, and Delia may know this better, but they used to have a person that did stuff on a yearly basis, and then he went away, so to speak. So that's when we came across Nick to get started and started up again.
Well, that'll be a very short report.
Yeah, right, 0, 0, 0, and 0, right.
Yeah, we're relatively new to the scene. We only came on, well, I think the initial contact was made back in May or so, but and we submitted, you know, our proposal then, and I guess, you know, the folks at Wright Farms had a number of issues, you know, delays and, you know, issues with COVID or whatever. So we were, you know, they indicated to us that they'd be willing to proceed at some point in the fall. I think we made that contact. So that's when I rewrote the proposal, and I think Chris or somebody submitted it to you all back in November. So we do outline, what we would intend to do this fall and winter, and then the follow-up next spring, and then sort of what would be involved on an ongoing basis. I mean, these kinds of plans are almost necessarily kind of adaptive. We take our best shot at what we think will work. And then after each sort of round of work or procedures, you sort of look to see what happened, what worked, what didn't, you evaluate, and then you sort of decide on the next step. So the material we presented in the outline is sort of our best guess at what we think we will need to do based on what typically happens in these sorts of scenarios. So that could change, obviously, depending on, what actually happens on the site, and, what resources the organization has to devote to this, because you can never do quite all of what you would like to do. So, you take what's available and, try to get the most sort of bang for the buck.
So I think that all sounds great, Nick. I think what the commission is looking for is just, making sure that what you do each season is captured and documented and submitted in an annual report with your recommendations, each year for what worked, what didn't work, and what areas are going to be targeted next. Because the map that is, was provided this time, as well as the 2017 or whatever that was, filing, it's the same map. And so it's sort of, hopefully what you'll be able to do is knock off certain areas and say, okay, these have been hit, and now it's just mop up kind of activities, and, make it a little bit more clear than perhaps was happening in the last go around.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, we're just recently involved, so I don't know what, was
Understood.
captured in the last, previous iterations of this. But I can certainly try to sort of map that out and present that to you. I think initially, just to, very briefly, I think our initial plan is to flail mow the larger areas that are most heavily infested. And these occur primarily near the sort of main entrance when you first pull in the road forks. There's quite an extensive area that is, and I don't have the square footage off the top of my head, but it's nearly exclusively invasives, and there's a whole rogues gallery of stuff in there. There's multiflora rose, there's bittersweet, which has apparently killed a number of trees. You can see some dead trees that the bittersweet has crawled up on. There's quite a bit of Japanese barberry. There's some burning bush, Japanese honeysuckle, autumn olive, garlic mustard, buckthorn, on and on. So our plan, the residents seem to be interested in doing this, and they've taken the initiative on this, which is great, because sometimes people need to be convinced of the sort of reasons to do this kind of work. But it sounds like they've already sort of bought into it. But even then, what we'd like to do is sort of provide an initial nice visual impact of doing a large area that pretty much everyone can see, and to kind of sustain that interest in the work. So that's one reason to approach this large area when you first come in. And then concomitant with that, as far as the budget will go, there's smaller pockets of infestation behind a number of the residences that we'll have to do by hand. This larger area we're planning to mow mechanically with a flail mower, and then just leave the chopped material in place on the ground as a mulch. And doing it that way saves us the removal costs. If you were to cut these by hand and have to haul everything away, number one, there's not really much point in doing that, and number two, it just costs a lot more. So with the machine, you can do quite a bit of area in a fairly short time. And then,
So how do you ensure that when you flail mow and leave the clippings in place that you're not, especially with bittersweet and anything that has fruited, and how do you ensure that you're not contributing to the seed bank or having, in the case of bittersweet, where anything that's cut and touches the ground then can become a new invasive, species in and of itself?
yeah, that's a reasonable question. A couple of things to say about that. Some plants, well, I'm trying to think of any plants where the top growth would root back into the ground from chopped pieces. And bittersweet, I don't think does that. And I don't think there are many that do that.
Bittersweet does. Any fragment of bittersweet will reroot.
Well, I know the root itself does if the root is chopped and not killed. Well, the issue becomes then, you'd have to cut each piece by hand and then try to pull it out and remove it. If there are berries on there, there's no way to prevent those berries from falling off the branches. And what you're dealing with is sort of one season's worth of fruit. And I don't know how many years those plants have been growing there untended, fruiting and dropping, seeds into the ground. So our operating idea is that to add one more year of that is insignificant compared to the 3 or 4 or 5 or however many years those plants have been there already fruiting. It just doesn't seem to us to be worth the effort to actually remove that material. And especially since, if we have a follow-up plan in place, we're going to need to control that seed bank over the first couple of years after this initial work anyway. So 1 year's additional seeding doesn't seem significant enough to us to warrant the effort and expense involved in removing the material. And, John has done this kind of work. He's done numerous projects with state DOT, Mass DOT. And this is the way they've done it. And they have, documented projects, and we can provide references of where this was done.
I think what would be most useful is to really document what you're doing on this particular parcel.
Yeah, we can clearly, let what we've done and what the results are, and the timing of all that, and a couple of times a year, whatever you would be comfortable having on that regard.
I think just an annual report is usually
annual. Okay.
Yeah, and I can definitely get that from Nick and get it down to you, Delia.
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Good.
But yeah, so there's just to kind of wrap the summary up. Yeah, we would do this initial round of grinding in the spring. We would monitor for reemergence of what was cut and sort of germination from seed of new plants. One advantage of the flail mowing is that somehow the plants, and I don't quite understand the physiology, but the plants don't seem to grow back as well as they do when they're just cut with a regular mower deck or with a pruner type device. So we're assuming there's going to be some regrowth we'll need to treat. Oftentimes we're surprised, and I've seen restoration projects where once they do the initial round of mowing or removal, it sort of releases a lot of the native plants, so you can get considerable native plant growth without having to plant anything, because those seeds I think stay viable even longer than the weed seeds do sometimes. So again, it's sort of an adaptive sort of stance we take, and if there are natives, we try to preserve those. And, to control the invasives, we try to exploit the differences in terms of, time of emergence or susceptibility to a particular active herbicide ingredient to sort of preserve as much of the native growth as we can and, target as much of the invasives as we can. And whether there'll be some money in the budget to do some supplemental planting later on, that remains to be seen. But, in the front, we would probably advocate for that to, install some native shrubs and trees just because it'll be an aesthetically sort of prominent spot. And if we can, you know, get everybody sort of excited about the project that way, then, you know, hopefully there will continue to be funding to, you know, do this sort of ongoing maintenance, you know, after this initial round of work. So.
Okay.
Excuse me, you mentioned, Nick, that as you do the flail mowing and then you're going to monitor the space for reemergence of invasive species. Would you be addressing those sprouts that come up? And if so, would that be hand pulled? Would it be pesticide or herbicide? How would that be addressed?
Oh yeah. Clearly, we'd be paying attention to that and you know, addressing that as it happens. The management technique, again, it's sort of adaptive, and it would depend on the species, on the number of plants. Generally, we try to avoid soil disturbance, because every time you pull a plant or create any kind of a soil disturbance, you're bringing seeds up that are underneath the surface, where they're effectively dormant, because seeds need, you know, light and air to germinate. And if they're a couple inches down, 3 inches, 4 inches down in the soil, once you disturb the soil, you bring those seeds to the surface where they have light and they can germinate. So unless there's some particular reason to pull plants, or there's just so few of them that you don't create a lot of soil disturbance, we'd rather not do that. So typically there'd be either a foliar herbicide application or a cut stem. You cut the plant and treat the remaining stump or stem with a more concentrated herbicide. And again, which of those would get used depends on, you know, the type of plant, the number of them. Typically herbaceous plants, you know, work better with the foliar application. If you have isolated bittersweet and buckthorn, you know, the cut stem approach works pretty well. One issue with cut stem is that when you have a lot of stems in a particular area and you're treating a lot of them that way, the label limits how much active ingredient one can use on a per unit area basis. And it's very easy to go off label, to go beyond that limit, if you have a dense stand of, you know, whatever woody species you're talking about. We run into this with Japanese knotweed, because, you know, you have a very dense stand of stems. And I forget the area off the top of my head, but you can't get much done with a cut stem approach, because you go off the label, you go beyond the label limit.
Yeah.
So with the foliar application, one advantage of mowing it first is that stuff comes back later on in the spring. If it does come back, you can go in when it's fairly short and the spray will still be effective. So you're not spraying 5-10 feet in the air. You don't have a lot of overspray. You're spraying downward on a plant that's a foot or two tall. So, you know, you both limit the amount of spray you need, and you limit the amount of overspray and sort of collateral damage you might encounter. So, yeah.
Okay.
These applications would be done by a licensed herbicide and
Pesticide applicator, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I noticed that garlic mustard is one of the invasives. I might be wrong, but I thought that actually hand pulling of garlic mustard in the springtime is the most effective way to control it.
It's effective. I don't know if it's the most effective, because it's fairly susceptible to herbicide as well. Again, soil disturbance creates its own sort of set of issues, and brings more seeds up. So sometimes you solve one problem, create another. I'm trying to recall the extent of the garlic mustard infestation. I don't have a mental image of that off the top of my head. A lot of, I think, what we saw was more of the woodies that were more problematic, the bittersweet, the buckthorn, quite a bit of Japanese barberry, probably as much barberry as I've seen on any site, back into the woods. So,
okay.
Yeah. And obviously being within the water resource area, you know, we would only use, you know, materials that, you know, approved for that setting. So.
Okay. Any public comment in regard to the plan here? Okay, in that case, do we have a motion?
I make a motion to issue a negative determination of applicability number 3 for Wright Farm Condominium Association at 1 through 24 Wright Farm, RDA file 20-21. The following conditions are included in this motion. A pre-construction site visit shall be held to review the limit of work. Number 2, following invasive removal, restoration areas shall be allowed to naturalize and/or native planting should be incorporated such that 80% of the vegetative cover is comprised of native species within 3 years. Number 3, the applicant shall submit annual monitoring reports to include site photographs, progress updates, treatment methods, treatment areas, treatment success, and follow-up recommendations. And number 4, after the project has been completed, the applicant shall submit a letter to the NRC stating that all work has been conducted in accordance with all conditions of this determination of applicability. Any changes from the RDA shall be described.
Sure.
Number 5, I think there's one more condition here.
Oh, thank you.
Following successful invasive species removal, the applicant and/or property owner may remove invasive species by hand or hand tool removal methods within jurisdictional areas in perpetuity.
Second.
Okay, we'll take the vote. Judy,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
and Greg.
Aye.
I'm aye as well. Thank you, guys. Good
Thank
luck.
you.
Good luck on the mitigation.
Great, thank you.
Take care. Okay, so Lindsay, you're back with us?
Yes, I apologize for that.
No,
I don't
no
know what
problem.
happened, but-
It happens. Thanks for coming back.
Well, thank you for having me.
So we'll go back. Please
So
re-
anyway, I explained what we're doing. The addition's 243 square feet. When Colleen came out for her site visit, she brought up some issues that we needed to attend to. One was the location of the stockpile, and we're fine. She mentioned something about a special condition. We were going to locate the stockpile in the front or in the driveway. The second one was we have a small propane tank that will be removed from the construction site during construction. The third one was protecting an American holly on the south corner of the house. We're going to temporarily remove that and replant it in the same place, but a few more feet away from the house. And the fourth issue was protecting the arborvitae and spruce, which we planted 15 months ago. They're all conifers, and they're relatively small. Colleen indicated that we needed to have some kind of protection for them. They, on the diagram, they're sort of near the barrier on the left, the erosion control. We're waiting to hear from our planters to see what they suggest we recommend for protection. We've had a couple of contractors in, and some of them say that they need to move them. If that's the case, we'll temporarily remove them and store them somewhere on the property and then put them back. But ideally, we don't really want to move them if we don't have to. And some contractors have said we wouldn't. But we were suggesting putting a fencing, temporary fencing around them, preferably because they're so small, put the fencing at the drip line. So that's basically what we're looking for.
Okay. Any commentary from the commission? Looks relatively straightforward. I think all these details to be added to the plan.
Okay, so for some reason our surveyor didn't put the trees on the plan. I don't know why. He didn't. but I guess we should put those on the plan.
Yeah, you should locate the stockpile location for the soil, you know. Note the trees and I think, you know, and if you could just, you know, if you're gonna, and just note that you're gonna remove the propane gas tank and so on. But if
Okay.
if you can get those on the plan, Delia, Friday would be the time to get that, the revision submitted to you for the January 20th meeting.
Okay, that'll probably be tight. I don't know if I'm gonna have to get to our surveyor and see if he can do it, but
Okay.
if not, I guess we're gonna have to postpone it another couple of weeks.
Okay. And before we go, I was remiss, I have to go out to the public for any comment on this before we finish up. Any public comment on this proposal?
One question is the protection, the fencing that we,
Lindsay, just give 1 sec.
Okay.
If there's any comment, then we can come back to you.
I don't see any.
Okay. Sorry, Lindsay, please go ahead.
What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, the protection of the trees, you know, would fencing along the drip line for those trees be okay?
Sure, I guess it's just a question of the detail, that's all. I don't think it's anything extensive necessarily.
Okay, okay. All
Yeah,
right.
just have the surveyor note that on the plan, provide a detail of what that tree protection looks like.
Okay. Okay. I'll
Okay.
try to get it in by Friday. If I can, I can.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. We'll either see you on the 20th or the 3rd of February.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now I think we're going to the extension request. And the Sims Development and Permitting LLC, file number 137-1408.
I am involved in this project potentially as a real estate agent, so I'm going to recuse myself from this discussion.
Thanks, Greg. Who's here this evening for the extension?
Rich Harrington from Williams and Sprogis.
Hey, Rich, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
Good.
Um,
Just give us a brief description of the request and.
Certainly, when I was back at Stamsky McNary, we filed a resource area delineation plan. That's 3 years ago. So what we did is we had Delia go out to the site and we adjusted a couple flags on a plan and prepared our own plan from Williams Barrages for that adjustment. Is the 2 flags to the left of the wetlands out back. Just to give you an overview, Main Street's on the bottom of the plan and Highland Street is on the right-hand side above the title block with 2 houses. So this is a depression in the back next to the railroad tracks, and it receives some additional runoff from Junction Square to the right of the plan with Center Village to the left. So Patrick Seacamp and Greg Hockworth from our office both went out there to check the line and prepared a letter, and I believe staff is okay with that. And so we're looking to basically extend it for the 3 years, which I saw in the draft. And it was deemed before as it's not isolated land subject to flooding. Calculations were done when at Stamsky McNary.
Yeah.
And that hasn't changed. So we just look at to, you know, carry that finding along, which I think it does when you extend the original order. And that's basically it, very straightforward.
I still don't have a problem with the 3-year extension. Yeah, very straightforward. Any comment from the commission on the request for extension? Okay. Any public comment in regard to the extension for this project? Okay. So with that, if I could have a motion.
I make a motion that we provide a 3-year extension for DEP file 137-1408, which is for Sims Development and Planning LLC, 1440 and 1450 Main Street, and 10B Highland Street.
A second.
Second.
Thank you, Sarah. Take the vote. Nick,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
Judy,
Aye.
and I am a yes as well. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Good night. Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Another extension request before us, 4848 Upland Road, DEP of file number 137-1102. And I think I saw Lisa here in the audience.
Yes, hello. I'm
Hi,
Lisa.
how are you?
Yes, I'm requesting an extension for the order of conditions for the demolition of the existing house and construction of a new house at 48 Upland Road. And Delia kindly sent me an order that the governor has issued that says the permit may have been extended already for a year's period. I've asked for up to 3 years that would allow time for construction, as well as the 2-year monitoring and reporting period that would occur after construction was completed.
Okay. Well, certainly, and thank you for the letter you sent, requesting the 3-year extension. And I'm sorry to hear of all the difficulties, over the past years. Certainly a very difficult situation. But notwithstanding, I think this is going into the 10th or 11th year. So it would be, as I understand it, highly, unusual to issue another 3-year extension. And as you note, hopefully you get some further protection under the COVID-19 Tolling Act, perhaps. So that might be a backdrop here. And just talking this out a little bit, from my perspective, I'd be comfortable issuing a shorter term extension. It sounded like you were, finally getting, kind of ready to go, at this juncture. So I could certainly see a 1-year extension at this juncture. And again, you might get some more, time under the COVID-19 tolling extent, but, would like to try to limit that, given that it's moving into its 11th year.
Understood.
I, again, like to get a sense of the commission as well.
Do we know for certain that she has the 1-year extension, or is that just possible?
That's what we're discussing tonight, Nick. As far as the COVID-19, is that the question you're
Yes,
asking?
the question is, does she automatically get one or not?
Adelia, do you want to talk to that? I know you did a little bit of investigation in regard to that.
So the toll permits, orders of conditions in March, and the July order. So basically what it said was it put a stop on the clock. So if it was,
Now she's gone completely.
Yeah. No. Well, let's give her a moment to sign back on. Difficult night with technology. There she is.
sorry about that.
There you go.
My connect, but in any event,
I'm not.
off.
Yeah, it's really choppy. Deal, you want to
Stop playing video games or whatever.
There
Phone
you
in.
go.
Phone in.
Yeah, you might. Well,
But in any event, the tolling period is the clock. So if a permit was issued in March,
Still cutting out, Delia.
Can she phone in? Would that be more
Yeah,
likely?
yeah, that might clear up at least the audio side of the equation.
You want to text her?
Yeah.
Okay.
I might actually be able to answer that. I don't know if it's going to be as well as Delia, but yeah, so this is Colleen. So for, I guess the tolling period would have gone from March to March under the COVID-19 regulations, but if we're going to do the extension, it would go from January 9th to January 9th. So that would just give it that 1 year. But I believe that's a synopsis of what Delia was trying to describe. She basically just said it this morning, so I'm hoping it's just a couple months difference, but it's whether I want to go with the COVID-19 or if you just want to do the extension from January to January.
Well, if there's a 1 year extension, as you say, she can get to January 2022, and then again, you might be able to tack on some additional months given the COVID-19 tolling. So, it's a little bit of belt and suspenders perhaps, but.
Well, it sounds like the extension is March to March. So if nothing is done here, this would expire in March now, unless there's an extension to that order. And so we actually have 2 months in which you're still viable to start your process and not need an extension. In other words, we're not running up against a date that it will expire and we haven't issued an extension. We have until March to do that, it sounds like.
I was thinking that what Colleen had said was that she'd have an additional year, not to March 2021, but to 2022.
That's what I would think,
Right,
Nick.
yeah, that's correct.
2022?
Yeah, to 2022. So, I mean, I would be comfortable. That would give enough time for Lisa to get a demolition and the construction under contract. And, we could probably then 1 more additional year would handle it. I'd be more comfortable doing that and getting this contract, this project under contract. Because at this point, unless it hasn't been revealed to us, I infer that there are no contracts for demolition or construction. Is that correct?
Not at this time, correct.
Right. So why don't we sort of ratchet it along? And you've got until, our understanding is you have an extension just by grace of the governor until March of 2022. And you can come back at that point, or before that point rather, apply for an additional year if it looks like the project needs it. But you might get the whole thing done in that year.
So I guess just to clarify, I'm not actually sure if it's to 2022. I think it's just, so the order started in March 2020, then until that's ended. So then it gives that 1 year. So it'd only be to 2021. So it only gives it 2 additional.
That's 2 months. That's nothing.
No, so,
Yeah, I know.
So let me just, sorry for jumping back in. Colleen, you're absolutely right. But that was a little bit of a hypothetical. So the clock stopped. Your permit, Lisa, was reissued in 2018, of March 2018. It's valid to March 2021. The governor issued a stay beginning March 10th of 2020. So theoretically, if the state of emergency for COVID is lifted in March of 2021, you still have that year because your permit was valid until 2021, but it was stayed in March of 2020, right? So you have that year, an additional year from whenever the state of emergency is lifted. So if it's lifted in March 2021, you have a year to 2022. If it's lifted in June of 2021, you have until June of 2022 to complete the work.
So basically the clock from the states, from the permit standpoint, has stopped right now. Is that correct?
That is correct.
There'll be a year left on it when the clock starts again.
Yeah.
That's, and Lisa, we had spoken earlier today and you had expressed concern that you weren't sure if it applied to orders of conditions. And I firmly believe it does. But what I would suggest, if you're concerned about that, is to speak to an attorney.
Yeah.
You have until March of 2021. Well, actually February, because you have to make the request a month before your permit expires.
Right.
So you have until February, let's say 8th, I think that's what the date is. I think it was March 8th that the permit was issued of 2018. So you have until February, whatever that day is, let's say it's 8th, to submit a request to extend to the commission. I think you're better off waiting, because I think that the governor's order gives you more of an extension than what the commission, sounds like a year is what the commission is willing to give you to complete the project. I think you're going to have more time under the governor's order than you would with what the commission, you know, and to be honest, I mean, the commission could vote to issue your extension tonight and it's valid to January 8th of 2022. You probably still have, you know, that leeway of whatever, but I think it's more complicated that way.
Right. Well, I guess the only thing I'd want to clarify is it's the governor's order applies to both the state permit and the local.
You bet. Yeah.
Under which the order was issued.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So the commission believes that is of that opinion.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Then it's probably best not to proceed with the request for an extension right now.
Yeah, but again, you may just want to check independently, so you've got that comfort that you've got that year plus under the
Right.
state. That's all. Might just want to check.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I'm just trying to avoid problems when I go to apply for a building.
Oh, you bet. You bet.
Yeah.
We don't want to have that happen either. So
Okay.
thank you,
Very
Lisa.
good. Okay.
So do you want to withdraw just to keep this sort of a clean process? Do you want to withdraw this extension that you filed now?
If I can do that without prejudice so that I could
Yes.
make the request again if needed.
Yeah.
Okay, good. That would be great.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yep. Thank you.
Next case in front of us is a minor mod, 141 Cumberford Road, DEP file number 137-1535.
We actually just revised the agenda this afternoon. We requested a continuance out to the January 20th meeting. Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Delia.
You're welcome.
So I think that brings us to our last issue, which is, I believe, is a brief presentation regarding the StarMet Reuse Committee update.
I am Pam Rockwell from 1810 Main Street, and I'm a member of the NMI StarMet Reuse Planning Committee. Delia, are those my slides? Did you just put up my slides?
I think, yeah, Pam, I think Delia's putting up your slides, and if you could give us a brief overview of where you're at, that'd be great.
So the NMI StarMet, there we go. So, the NMI StarMet Reuse Planning Committee was created about a year ago. At that time, I came before your commission to let you know that we were working on a project to come up with a plan with recommendations and some information for the Board of Selectmen. We had a big public forum, which the NRC participated in, and members of the NRC had commented on previous information that we've put out. We've since done a survey, we've reached out to more town committees, and our committee now has developed an actual draft plan that we're putting out for review. And I wanted to let you know what was going on in that plan and how it's going. Delia, can I go to the next slide? So, we have developed principles for based on the Long Range Planning Commission, multiple integrated uses, fiscal sustainability, community synergy, but the reason I'm here is the environmental stewardship part. You want to go to the next slide? When I talk about environmental stewardship, what we mean for this site is we mean low impact development. We mean carefully designed stormwater management, energy efficient design, renewable energy built into the site like solar, potentially wind. When I suggested wind to you last year, nobody was happy about that idea. But also battery storage for solar energy generated at the site, for nearby utilities as well, because this site is across the river from the Grace solar farm. And the town has a lot of solar energy. So when the sun's really shining, it's going nowhere. This site is right along backs up to Forest Ridge Road, where the power comes from the solar site over to the substation. And so building in battery storage for solar energy would be a valuable thing to do at this site and require a very small footprint. So it's part of almost any plan that you would look at for this site. And of course, car-free access, public transit access, people being able to walk into the site. I'm going to go to the next slide. So our town is going, first of all, our committee did decide that we want to recommend that the town actually start the process of taking ownership of this site, that owning the site would be a good thing to do. And we have started a redevelopment plan, which we call our master plan concept. And we're going to be providing some other recommendations to the Board of Selectmen. The next slide. So this is one of the first things that we developed at the site, which is the potential reuse zone map. This site is out along Route 62, almost to West Concord, to Acton. The site is near the river. It backs up to Thoreau Hills. The areas on the site that we identified, first of all, it's a 46 acre site. Of that, 23 acres is in green there, which is basically stuff that we would want to be conservation land of some kind. Area D is an old cooling pond that is a wetlands. Area B is an old holding basin. That's an area that's going to have significant cleanup done to that site. There's going to be material in a sarcophagus underground that's going to be packed and sealed and capped, and maybe a parking lot, maybe a grassy field or a tree lined field, but you're never going to be able to build anything on it. And areas A1 through A4 are areas that could be built on. I'm going to go to the next slide. Delia. So the master plan concept that we have is, first of all, those conservation areas, the C areas, the cooling pond recharge area, and the old holding basin. Those are areas that are going to be restored probably naturally. But the area A1 we felt was really, this was a heavy industrial site. There are building footprints there. This is where the parking lots were. There's a driveway road around the outside. We really feel like that is the prime area of development. And basically all of our recommendations say we're going to be redeveloping in that area A1. Basically that's now, then the other areas, A2, A3, and A4, those are areas for potential housing, potential sports fields, or potentially to be left alone. You want to go to the next slide, Delia? So this is the first part of the plan of what we would want to see happen to those conservation areas. First of all, that these areas back up to town trails. We would like extensions of town trails into those areas. We'd like to see environmental education areas like a platform for bird watching. Right now, the people that go into this site, that trespass, are there to look at the birds and are trespassing around this beautiful sphagnum bog, which is the area in the center of C1 there that has the little growth things in it. So this is like the other map that you saw, so it's set back a little further so you can see the town trails, the Powder Mill Trail, and how it would link in potentially with this area at the site. Again, this is more than half the site that we're talking about leaving in a pristine condition when we're done. Some of area C2 actually will require remediation, but we it will be restored naturally. And there's a parking lot that's part of C1 right now that will get restored naturally. That there's really not any sensible reason to put a parking lot back in the wetlands back there. So this is the first part of our master plan, is the restoration of these conservation areas, potentially conservation areas. Next slide. So area D, the old cooling pond. This is an important thing to you because this was previously a non-contact cooling pond. It's a wetlands. It'll be restored as a drainage pond of some kind. This is an opportunity to restore this really well, and not just as a big puddle of rocks somewhere where water will flow in. This is adjacent to the sphagnum bog. You do not want things growing there that's going to interfere with the growth of other things and along the hillside. This could be a beautiful rainwater garden. This could provide drainage for the site in a very manageable way. So this is something that I would like to see the Natural Resources Commission have an opinion on, how they would like to see this area restored, this area D. Next slide. So areas A2 and A4 are wooded hillsides that have never been developed. They have never been contaminated. When I came here before, I talked about using soil from area A2 as a way to backfill some of the other sites, the other cleanup sites at this site where they were going to be digging up, building footings along in A1 and filling in the old holding basin and such. Basically, they have found other soils for this site, mostly from 1440 Main Street development and from other developments in the site that are close by that wouldn't require a lot of transportation. They have places to store it at the site in the meantime until they start building. So there is no reason why they have to, why anything has to happen on A2 or A4. Area A3 is actually an old sweepings pile. That is dredgings from that old cooling pond were dumped there, and they will have to be removed. When it's removed, there's a question about whether it'll be restored as a wooded hillside or whether it will be restored as a flat, sports field or whatever. But your commission did have opinions about A2 not being used, and I think we took them very seriously. I still have to point out, as someone that would love to see some housing developed at this site, that putting housing on areas that have never been developed at the site and that never had toxic waste at the site is much happier idea to me than putting it on A1. But, that's something that from the commission's point of view, I can see you continuing to support your opinion that you don't want to see these areas developed as part of comments that you might have to the commission, to my committee, or to the Board of Selectmen when they start evaluating this. Next slide. So the master plan concept that we had looked at 3 potential reuse scenarios within that A zone. Well, the first one was a municipal recreation use scenario, and the second one was a commercial industrial use scenario, and the third one was very much a dense mixed use scenario with a really small footprint. Next slide. So this is the first concept, basically put a nice indoor field, community center, Harvey Wheeler plus style building on this site. You site it so that maybe you get advantages of being able to view the areas, the conservation areas that are there. And then areas A3 and A4 might end up being outdoor fields. Area A2 might potentially be future housing. But the first development portion would be this major municipal recreation, multi-purpose indoor facility in A1. Next slide. So this looks the same pretty much, except we're looking at maybe more housing in A3 and A4 instead of sports fields, and a commercial office medical complex, something light industrial, something very much money making inside that A1 area for redevelopment. Basically, the difference between these two plans is really about what kind of finances and who owns and what uses are within that circle, but they're They're basically talking about spreading out the whole area. The next slide, please. The third concept is very much more environmentally friendly. We're not going to touch A2 or A4. Maybe we'll put a sports field on A3 because they flattened it when they dug it up, but that's something we can think about later. But basically, we're going to put housing, we're going to put commercial, we're going to put municipal, and we're going to build them all up tall so that they have a small footprint, very environmentally friendly. So the reason I'm here to talk to you is to get your comments about what you feel about these things, pointing out, again, from my perspective, I would expect the environmental community to be more interested in this mixed use concept, or maybe even saying less use, but more likely this mixed use facility would be the right kind of thing. And I would really want to be able to get your comments about this to take back to my committee now, to encourage you to actually comment on the plan that's available and to ask me questions about it so I can get a feel for how it's going. And I think I've got one more slide, which is just the link to the document. If you look on my committee's website, it's the last link on the page. So, does anybody have any questions?
No, Pam, thanks, Pam. That was a nice, kind of broad overview of kind of, thoughts for the Starmet facility. Obviously, there's I read your plan that you had sent along, the initial draft of some of these thoughts in a more expanded way. Obviously, there's 4, 5, 6 years of cleanup there. That's got to be undertaken. It's a major project, so allows proper time for, as figuring out, what's income producing for the town, what's the best mix of uses, obviously a lot of public process to go through, and ownership decisions in terms of taking ownership, which seems to me to make perfect sense. And again, I would support your perspective, or certainly our perspective of that C1, 2 area. I think it's the D area, which is the stormwater thought. And I think, as you noted, A2, rather than cutting that hillside and filling, I was just talking to Delia the other day saying there's so much construction going on, there's got to be a lot of soil in the nearby vicinity to, put that in the hole versus chopping, a nice hillside. And one of the questions would be, as the plans solidify in the future, would the conservation area be deeded to the NRC, or would it be, just kind of labeled as conservation and see where that goes in the future? Certainly, I think we'd like to see it kind of under our purview so that we feel that it's going to be conserved in perpetuity. So that would be one consideration that would be, looking, or one of the comments I think we'd have.
I think, building on Ed on that point around the back, I think deeding it to the NIC would be quite appropriate, because it's really rich in wildlife back in there. And it should be protected for its natural resources, and not potentially, if it's not deeded to the NIC, it leaves it open to those resources not being protected as well as we would protect them.
Yeah.
So I'll have to say that my question about that is, would you also want the old cooling pond area too, the D area? That would be the stormwater drainage site? Because from my perspective, I look at that as potentially being a source of future problems to the other areas at the site. You want to go back to the map?
Yeah, Pam, one of the considerations there, as you noted, I think the thought was either obviously a significant rain garden or stormwater management, playing a large role in that. And obviously, until it's determined of what kind of development is going to happen and what's impermeable, what's permeable, on most particularly A1, I would think hard to kind of gauge should be treated and to what degree. And but certainly having some hand in that, some control in that would make sense. Nick, I think you're on mute.
Muted, Nick.
I don't know a lot about bogs, but one thing I learned recently was that bogs don't have water flowing through them. They're very stagnant areas. And I just concerned about the whole development, about flow of stormwater into the bog. I mean, there must be some flowing in now because of the topography, but I think we just have to be careful about that. We need someone with some expertise and knowledge of bogs if we're going to protect that bog.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I thought also, Pam, your point around, not only protecting the bog, certainly from the water going in, but also, as I recall, because I went on the site visit, that the bog itself is relatively there's like no invasive species in there. So it is, from a plant life perspective, very well protected. And so if the NIC, and again, I would defer to other people, but one thought would be is if the NIC had was also deeded the cooling pond, then would we be able to make sure that whatever plantings are being done around that area are done in a way to maintain the integrity of that pond, of the bog?
Yeah, I think that makes really good sense to me. So that I can get those comments back to my committee about that you think that this would be, that it's important that it's not just that it's conserved, but it becomes the NRC's responsibility by being deeded to the NRC.
Also, if that current area is pretty much free of invasives, even though the town, sounds like the town, it'll be years probably before the town actually takes ownership of the land. It would be good if we could have some role in making sure that it stays free of invasives. If the Natural Resources Commission, the department actually could have some oversight and management or some sort of some protective concern.
Right. I mean, I think if it was deeded to the NRC, that possibility would be there.
Yeah, I know, but that might not happen for 5 or 6 years. I'm talking about in
the interim.
Yeah, now.
Right. That might be a little bit more challenging just because it's not going to come to the town until it's fully cleaned up.
Right.
Yeah, fortunately back in that area, because I walk back there all the time, that area around there does not have invasive species in it. It's from a plant life perspective, it's quite native.
And Judy, are you talking about generally the C1 area itself?
I'm talking around the area that's owned by the town. I don't trespass. I try to peek in, but I have not trespassed. But I walk back along the Powder Mill Road trails all the time, and there's no invasive species back in that area.
Okay.
So Pam, a question that I had was there was a map that showed a trail that sort of ran along this ridge between the bog.
Go back in the slides back there.
What's that?
Delia, if you back up, I think she said if you back up to one of the slides, I think one of those go to a little bit more. I think it's.
You went past it.
Yeah, you just went past. Keep going.
One more.
Yeah,
One more. That's it.
So.
Nope.
I know a couple of questions though. So this one shows this shows a green area that's larger than what was proposed in the C1, C2. And the trail actually comes in here.
The holding basin and the cooling pond are included in that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and the holding basin there's some question about whether it would be a good thing to make it a parking lot and pave it. And from my perspective, that's because I feel that one of the things that might happen later is that somebody might decide to drive heavy trucks across it. And if it's not prepared to have heavy trucks across it, then maybe that might damage some of the remedy that's below it. I've been told they can still make it strong enough for trucks, but if we actually want to pave it, then it's important to build in the stormwater drainage from the runoff problem from paving into the remediation so that it doesn't go towards the stagnant bog.
Yeah, so that means possibly road salt and all sorts of things we have to worry about if it's paved.
Well, that would. Isn't this a bridge between the bog and these two you know, the holding basin and the,
I think the bridge, if you go back to the other picture, that
up or down?
I think the bridge is actually sort of along the top edge.
I don't think it's a
of-
bridge. I think this is a ridge. I've stood
A ridge, okay.
trail here and I've looked and I've seen the bog and it's surrounded by this high land.
Well, you
And
can see the topos, you can see that it is.
Yeah, so it's sort of a ridge because the holding basin is a big hole right now. And the holding basin will get built up to a certain level. So the question will be how high and what direction. You know,
Right.
That's
Right.
some
Got
of
it.
that.
Yeah.
There is in fact an old bridge, a Gabion wall, I think is what it's called, between basically where the D is heading towards the C1 area where there was a parking lot back there.
Oh.
And that is falling down and going to come apart. And that helped protect material from the cooling pond from overflowing into the other bog. They call it a bog, but it's really just a wet area right there along Route 62, which happened several times that they overflowed or pumped water that way from the cooling pond. And although the cooling pond was supposed to be clean water, it wasn't always, but I don't think that there's anything in that bog area that's going to be cleaned up, but it isn't, it's not a sphagnum bog, but it's definitely a wetlands that can't be built on and fairly steep as well.
Yeah, you know, back to Delia's point and Nick's earlier point about, you know, making sure that, because the bog is in really good shape, environmentally, is to, whatever development is done, if things are built up, to still maintain that ridge, because that might be in large part why that bog has maintained its integrity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It seems, can we go to the plan that had that whole area green?
You mean the broader green?
Yeah, the broad,
Greg?
keep
Yeah.
going, we'll find it eventually.
Right there.
There. I mean, would it simplify our approach if I don't know this slide doesn't seem to have a number or anything, might be, that might be something we should do is number these, that we suggest that this slide be one that we would appreciate being deeded all the green, which gives us the control rather than try to say what we're going to do with it today or anything else, but just advocate that B, D, C1, et cetera, and C2 become the entity or be reserved as open space that we suggest comes to us. Whether it comes to us or not, we suggest that it remain green, no matter who ends up owning it. Because I'm much more interested in it staying green than getting ownership. Ownership would be a secondary goal, because I don't want to own B if it's a parking lot, you know?
But I think Pam's point is a good one, that B probably should be paved. And the commission probably wouldn't want that. So I like the way that you're thinking about that, Greg, that, you know, green should be conserved. I would suggest that in order to make sure that it is conserved, that it does come to the commission, because.
Well, I agree, but I'd rather fight the battle of keeping it green. And the second thing is, well, if it's green, then it should belong to NRC. Right. Rather than saying, oh, well, they say, oh, well, we'll give NRC A1 too, but we're going to put buildings on it. I mean, I don't want.
But how does green land stay green if it is not under NRC custody? Who else is going to protect it from not being developed?
I'm not arguing that issue with you at all. That's the argument I would use as well to get it to put into the NRC's control. Granted. But I think it's a secondary battle. The primary battle is to say that we would like this committee, that's the NMI committee, we would like them to recommend that this all stay green.
Oh,
NRC.
This is the green. Okay, good.
Yeah, Greg, the only thing I thought I understood from Pam, Pam, maybe I misunderstood, is that for protection, because that's going to be where a bunch of ugly stuff is encased. Is that were you suggesting that that B might need to be paved to protect the integrity of the technology that's used to encase those materials?
Not to encase the materials. My thought was that if somebody's doing something later on, they'll be careful about it.
It's very hard to hear you, Pam.
Yeah, could you lean more towards your computer?
Okay, so does that help?
That's better, yeah.
Yeah.
So my concern is that somebody will decide to park dump trucks there or things like that at some future date, not during the cleanup itself, and that it should be sturdy enough to be packed enough so that it can handle that. If your opinion about it is different, which is true. I mean, Gary Kleinman, who is the chairman of my committee, is also of the view that this would be a nice thing to plant with trees. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to look at as well. And if that's your recommendation, that be green and planted with trees and no building or parking be happening on it, then I was going to say, if you're going to leave it undone, that planting trees on it would be a good idea so that you're not parking vehicles on it for a meeting or something like that.
Do you know how you're talking about dumper trucks, and I'm imagining really heavy trucks that you're concerned may cause problems in the future. What about lighter traffic, like just a general area for people to park if they're going to be walking in the woods? Would that be an issue?
So if you're going to do it, if you're going to make this one of the parking places for that purpose, certainly there's going to be plenty of parking within the A1 area if that's developed for people to be able to walking. So there's no need to put parking there because there won't be enough somewhere else on this property.
Oh, that's good to know. Okay.
Yeah.
However, my feeling about it is that, that would be a really cool place for people to be able to park a school bus and then walk over to a platform along the edge of the Sphagnum Bog to have a class.
It's okay to walk longer distances.
That's true.
If I might, that to me, B looks like it's right next to the bog. The bog would be a protected area. It would come in front of the NRC anyways, and I would suggest you park elsewhere if I were still on the NRC. So my advocacy is to report back, if you're asked for the commission, I would urge my commissioners to support me in saying that we would like the entire green to remain as green, no paving, no hot top, that it's a reserved area, and secondly, that we think it should be under the auspices and control and ownership by the NRC, but primarily fight the battle that B does not become anybody's parking lot. Should we decide as a commission that 4 spaces for vehicular automobiles in the year 2099 can park there for a trail, that's something we as a commission can talk about that 50 years from now. But
yes, okay.
There you go.
No, that makes absolute sense. That's why I was just wondering, I was just wondering, how much weight does there have to be for it to be a concern, just out of interest, really?
I don't, Sarah, my guess is we probably won't know that answer until we know the solution of capping that. The area
80 feet down, and it's going to have multiple
concrete levels
of concrete on top of it.
So it really shouldn't be an issue.
I don't think there's any issue of cracking the
I don't either
on this whatsoever.
I
think it's just simply a matter of setting the land aside in its natural state so that we don't have issues of contamination of the bog. Inadvertently, nobody would mean it, but it happened because we changed the topography or something of that nature. And same with the cooling pond up above, which borders the road.
And Delia, can I just ask, the walking trails that the proposal would continue into this area, who currently owns or manages those walking trails?
Those are us.
Okay, so I just thought that might be another justification for why it makes sense
Yeah.
for this area to come to the NRC.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, in
so
fact,
I'm not-
I would like to make the point, living back there, having lived in this area I live about less than a half mile from this site. And I've walked back there, for the past 19, 20 years. Is that, certainly, I think, I support, Greg, what you're saying, is that whole area has taken a number of hits in terms of development. There's black birch, cut down a bunch of trees for that. There was an open field, which is now the Concord Mews. So that took out a completely open field where there used to be a lot of wildlife. So, fortunately with black birch, we did receive, some conservation land here, but that area back there has taken an enormous hit on natural resources. And I can tell you that I have observed we don't have fox back here anymore. And some other, wildlife have gone down some. So, as much as we can take that into account, both by asking for that portion that Greg suggested be protected, but also there's other areas. You're right, Pam. I would, from an environmental standpoint, advocate for the dense development, so that even those other areas, the A2 and the other ones that are
I think it's A4, Judy.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
go back
try
one
to,
slide.
yeah,
You go
try
back to the
to.
full map. Okay.
Yeah, there we go. A4, A2,
Right.
A3, A4. Try to maintain those as much in natural condition as possible, both for the aesthetic properties of walking back on the trails, because they run right along that property. And then secondly, to help maintain at least some more of the environment for wildlife back there, because it's taken a big hit back in that area.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think A2 and A4 are somewhat challenged by topography too, particularly A2.
Well-
I think it's so.
Well,
This is
so
supposed to be neutral in terms of cost to the town, is from what I understand the goal here. I would suggest that, you are suggesting a commercial use and office and that sort of stuff. And I think historically, Forest Ridge was originally supposed to be that, and that has never been sought by the business community to use that area of town for that purpose. So you might want to think about that. Secondly, housing is wonderful, but it is out at the edge of town without any public transportation that one wouldn't have to invent and supply. And you might think about the town as its whole and say, okay, are there areas of town that we're using for public that we could move out here and use the areas that they presently are being used for those purposes? And I'm thinking of Kai's Road, for instance.
Yeah.
Kai's Road could be like the light plant, move out to the edge of town, the bus station's out here, and use just a portion of it, whatever's needed. And then you'd have Kai's Road to think of for housing and potentially business, I get commercial, but certainly housing. It would have transportation, it would have shopping and everything. So, I mean, I think we should open the camera up a bit and look more holistically as what the town might need, rather than take a site and look within the site and say, what can we do here? It's what does the town actually need? And I don't have the answer, but I just use Kai's Road that was a quick, I mean, I was involved when Kai's Road booted the light plant up the street, and we were happy to get them out of there, and it might be wise to get Delia out here where she can walk.
Yeah, I was thinking that you can walk in your lunch break, Delia. Nice.
So I'll have to say that we looked at that pretty seriously, actually, this idea of putting stuff here that people didn't want other places. And that is, Kai's Road is why I was saying the holding basin needs to be strong enough to have dump trucks on top of it, because that was my thought, was what would end up being on top of the holding basin would be parking the dump trucks.
Well, no, you just that would be owned by the NRC, and that just wouldn't happen.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to put, but so I don't think that is something that the idea that in A1 with the municipal and recreational facility, that would include potentially if Delia wanted the NRC offices out here, or if something like that is whether that's option 1 or option 3, which was the dense mixed use idea. But if you are very much of the opinion that A4 and A2 should not be disturbed, because right now they are undisturbed and they don't need to be disturbed, then are you suggesting that the NRC would like to see those also conserved and deeded to the NRC?
I would think that would make sense going down the same road there.
I mean, is that something I really should give my committee as feedback? Is
I would be reluctant to restrict the use of that as an this is just my personal, of course, opinion. I would prefer, of course, to see A2 and A4 remain as is. I'm not saying not, but I would prefer to have that be a very secondary suggestion and not be equal to or even perceived to be equal to the fact that B, D, C1, and C2 be green and belong to us. The other ones would be, and show me a reason. I wouldn't want A4 to be leveled so that we can get a as much as I enjoy softball, a softball field way out there. I would say no. But if you need a piece of it or something to fill in, to work around, I think we just want that flexibility, even as an NRC group. That's just my feeling.
That's why when at the meeting, I had indicated I respect the conservation land that surrounds A2, A3, and A4 if it is considered for development. So for instance, I think it would be a shame to level it and put in plain fields right up against the conservation land.
Right.
Maybe a little corner of it towards the center, but you respect the natural boundaries around there to help.
One thing about that, any conversation about putting public works there, they have a lot of heavy equipment, and that probably leaks a lot of stuff. And I was on the conservation committee on the Public Works Commission for 7 years, and they don't want to move from where they are. And ecologically, I mean, from an environmental standpoint, having all their trucks run from one edge of town all over the rest of the town uses a lot more fuel, is a lot less efficient. And I'm just worried about having all that equipment there and the possible effect it would have on what we're trying to preserve.
I think that's why they
next to the river where you are now, and there was a major push to get DPW off of the site where they are years ago. If you you can weigh that one way or another, and I certainly wasn't advocating doing that. I think it's just to keep an open mind as to run all those things through the matrix that you could do.
Right.
I haven't heard this discussion talk about that.
Pam, has there been much discussion? I mean, there was a lot of discussion going on about a year and a half ago about where to put town facilities, all the town offices and things. Has there been any discussion about putting any of them here?
So the idea of that for using A1 as a municipal sports recreation facility, that would include probably offices related to the recreation. That could include a lot of offices. That can also include a lot of meeting space.
Yeah, no, I was talking more about offices because just the town, they were concerned about the capital implications of what we need to do. But I don't know, with what they're doing in renovating the townhouse, maybe that's not such an issue anymore.
Well, it's still an issue.
Huge issue.
The department is busting out at the seams, so that continues to be looked at. Pam, can I just ask, or maybe this is a question for the commission. So there's these green areas here that are shown on this map, and then these green areas that are shown here. So is the commission recommending that this is what the green is that should be
Yes.
for conservation? Okay.
Yeah, I think Greg noted that in his
Yes.
discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on that too. So, and also to ask the question, just looking at the topography, does it make sense to have that also just encompass this area that has this, this little esker here and some.
Where does that trail tie in, Delia? Is the green?
The trail ties in, I'm gonna say it is.
Right about there, so that does
Right
attach
about,
to it.
it's right about here. It comes in through like this.
Okay.
Yeah, the
This
current trail, I
captures
think,
it.
runs along that whole boundary there. and then it turns and goes along A4.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, just in terms of, not altering the topography, whether that green should extend out along here to capture this
Yeah,
sort of this hillside.
That small ridge there.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will get that. I mean, I think that's very reasonable. That's a question I was asking you. So
Yeah.
I'm surprised about you wanting the holding basin area, but I understand your argument there. So, and again, there's others who also feel it should be natural. So.
Yeah. And Greg, I would concur with your perspective that C1 is and B and D are the primary, goal here.
Right.
And C2.
And C2, yeah.
Yeah. Didn't
Yeah.
name them all. And A2, A4 being secondary, but I would agree with that as well in terms of, priorities.
Yeah, weigh the ramifications of leveling A2 and A4 against the gain that we would prefer to see that be a remarkable gain for the town in order to warrant taking the natural state out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would not feel comfortable in compromising losing the green.
Agreed. Agreed. Good point.
I will have to say that the
Pam,
government.
can you just speak up a little bit, Pam, please?
Sorry, the government is cleaning this up to a residential standard because they felt that, our zoning says that there can be residences there. And if we take the property and we don't plan to have some housing on it, then we're not going to get they might change their minds and not truck away so much soil as they would if they were doing it that way. I don't want to risk that. I want to always be talking about putting some housing at this site. Even if we say, well, we're going to put housing on A2 and we argue for 25 years and then we conserve it and turn it, change their mind after the cleanup is done.
No,
I'm happy to do it that way.
Well, Pam, it's a good point, but because cleaning up to a residential standard is a significant cost beyond commercial standards.
And I think they've already voted to agree to do that. I don't think they can go back on that agreement at this point. That's a legal document.
It's a decree, right?
Into agreement on them.
Yeah.
Theoretically, it is a legal document, but there can be amendments on legal documents. We would amend it if we found new materials there. We would go back and clean those up. So I don't like to take chances until the soil is gone.
I get your point, but I do not want to sit in a public forum and discuss potentially fraudulently tricking the federal government. So I am not willing to agree that I tell them I'm doing residence with any intentions of not doing residential.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my guess is beyond, public amenity and recreation, housing is probably a very viable use here. I'm not so sure about the commercial side of the equation, honestly. So
Yeah, it could be some high density housing back in there.
yeah, workforce housing, high density housing, affordable housing, all those attributes.
Yeah, and the area A3 that has to be dug up
Any
in
other-
order for new materials that, that could be left flat for development for a later, and you could put a soccer field on it
absolutely.
time while you discuss it. So.
Yep. Okay. If any, I see one person in the public. If any comment from the public on this? Are we here?
No comment. Very interesting. Thank you.
Okay.
Amity.
Just checking. Thank you, Amity.
It's a great opportunity, and thanks, Pam, for working on this.
It sure is.
A lot of work,
Yes.
you guys.
Yeah. A lot
Thank
of
you
work
so
ahead
much.
too. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Pam.
You're very welcome.
Okay. All right. With that, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Good night.